So thanks for coming today to talk about the DCC mission statement, and possibly a little bit at the end to talk about the goals. But mostly I want to talk about the mission statement. And Trish Prunty had mentioned to me that I kept referring to the mission statement as a working document. What did I mean by that? And then other words that I've thrown out is the mission statement as a planning document. And at least in terms of our self-study process, it's both. It is a working document, which means it's something that should be reviewed periodically, updated as needed, reaffirmed where appropriate, but absolutely a living document that we work with to conduct our business. And that's not something that's been part of our culture, at least in the 10 years that I've been here. So it is a working document. Middle States explicitly says that it's a planning document. And specifically, the way that it's supposed to be a planning document is that it sets a course for the college, that we can then plan our activities, our services, and reacquaint ourselves with who we are, what we do, and most importantly, whom we serve. And so the three really important planning components of a mission statement, a mission document, is defining who we are, what we do, and whom we serve. So that's the premise of the meeting today, is that discussion and then a reflection of, or a discussion about how we're doing with that. Any questions as I get started? Is anybody surprised by anything I've said so far? Or does that make sense to everybody? I just don't know how to work my gadgets. All right. Now, the other thing that has changed dramatically since the 2005 Middle States 10-year review is that Middle States has become much cleaner about saying what they expect from us with respect to assessment and how to use assessment in our planning, in our budget allocations, in our decisions to change materials and courses or change programs. That they want us to be a data-driven institution. And they also explicitly say that our accreditation is based on how well the institution embraces those marching orders to be a data-driven institution, both in terms of institutional planning, the things that we haven't thought about in an assessment way, and academic assessment, which we have talked about a lot for a long time. But what they're asking for is that we're a data-driven institution, top to bottom, bottom to top, and all around. A couple of the key buzzwords that are associated with this particular concept of a mission statement is that it sets a course for us that is sustainable, measurable, and useful to us as an institution. Our current mission says that the mission of DCC is to provide open access to affordable, quality post-secondary education to the citizens of Dutchess County and others. As a comprehensive community college, DCC offers college transfer and occupational technical programs, certificate programs, lifelong learning opportunities, and service to the community. The college provides educational experiences that enable qualified students to expand their academic capabilities and further to develop thinking and decision-making skills. By providing a full collegiate experience, the college seeks to ensure that all students achieve their individual potential. So that's our current mission statement. And I don't know who was present when our speaker in the January meeting was here, Mr. O'Banion, but he suggested we might want to take a look at our mission statement and think about tweaking it. He said that to me at the end of the afternoon. meetings and in my own research and reading and talking and going to the institutes and whatnot and reading other colleges, I would offer the same suggestion that we want to maybe take a serious look at what is our mission in terms of who we are, what we do, and who do we serve. And have we said that cleanly here in a way that's easy to measure and defend with data? In order for a mission statement to be a planning document, it has to make sense in the organizational structure. So what I'm offering isn't necessarily our organizational structure per se, but what it might ought to look like with the mission statement as a planning document to help us organize. The idea is that what we do reflects the course that we've charted for ourselves, and we recognize and we can discern whether or not we are following that course by how well what we're doing maps us back to our mission statement, our original mission statement. So the idea is that the mission statement guides just about everything we do at the college, if it's an effective planning document. And therefore, it should be a working document that we're using regularly because it makes sense to us to use it, because it helps us to stay on course and to focus our conversations and to focus our efforts across the various units, both the administrative side of the house and the academic side of the house, all seeing ourselves as rowing in the same direction towards the same goal, serving the same population. And it all makes sense to us because we've agreed to it in this set of marching orders called the mission statement. So, the essentials of the mission statement, at least as my reading so far from Middle States, other accreditation agencies, other institutions that have been successful in this process, are basically three. That we define our broad educational purposes, clarify a target student population, and articulate our commitment to achieving student learning. Middle States is suggestive about this last point. But I think that for me, this is the takeaway point. We're an institution about learning. And how do you promote learning, create learning, and have learning, student learning, as your primary purpose? And that's a personal assumption that does bias some of what I'm telling you. Now, I know that Johanna is going to love the particular word that's on the next slide. One of the things that we want to do is make sure that our student learning programs and services are aligned.
With scaffolding.
We've had that argument for, 4 or 5 years now. Or discussion, I should say, vigorous discussion. But that they should line up in some way, whether we call it a scaffold or an alignment. That our purposes, our institutional character, and the populations that we're working with align with the programs and services that we're offering. The mission statement is a lawful document. It's formally approved by the board and sanctioned by the state. And so as such, it's a legal tool as well as a planning tool. Now, in 2005, sorry I didn't get to my slide. In 2005, we made a pretty grand proclamation about our mission statement being important to us and that we were going to make sure that we reviewed it every 5 years. Well, I'm pretty certain we didn't do that again until we started this semester starting to talk about that. And so one of the things that we want to be careful to do is to not say we're going to do things and then not follow through with them. If the mission statement is important to us and it's a tool that we're using, it makes sense that we review it regularly. Maybe not 5 years, maybe 10, but we would have a clear plan for that review process because it's a useful instrument to us. So far, I would suggest that we haven't considered as an institution our mission statement as a working document, a planning tool, or a terribly significant part of what we do. And I'm strongly suggesting we want to reconsider the importance we give to the document. So Middle States, and this is shorthand for Middle States. Middle States is asking for us to describe the institution with evidence, that they're not interested in flowery descriptions, that they don't want a very long document. In fact, they'd like our 10-year review to be constrained to about 100 pages long. Now, there's other documents that would be that we'd use as appendices, but that they want essentially a data-driven paper that's short, clear, and concise, and has evidence backing every claim. And to the degree that we're able to do that, we're giving them the kind of direct evidence that they're asking for. What they certainly won't do is accept promissory notes that we're going to do this in the future. They'll want clear plans, they'll want evidence, and they'll want, hopefully, a guarantee that we think that data is important, qualitative as well as quantitative data. There are systematic ways to gather qualitative data to give you very good pictures of things without reducing them to single numbers. That kind of quantitative research is important, but qualitative research is important equally as strongly, and Middle States both recognizes that and says so explicitly in their planning documents. So the questions that we should be asking: how do we spend money to run the institution? And how is that spending tied to our planning? That's one of the real challenges in the college right now at the cabinet level, that they're having discussions about how to put planning and the process of budget allocations together, and to make that a connected process that flows from the mission statement through the planning process across the units, and then has an assessment component that takes us back to planning, a continuous improvement model. No. That improves student learning. Lots of different ways to describe improving student learning. But our main marching order, at least my take on it, is to promote and improve student learning. All right. Now, that kind of plan might look something like this. That my purple colors are the strategies, the objectives, the ways that we see what our mission is, how we're going to accomplish that mission, and where it's going to take us. The yellow colors represent the operational drivers. What do we have to do semester to semester, year to year, to make strides towards that pathway? And then the red is that we have to make decisions, and those decisions ought to be backed with data. The green is the process of collecting data and then using that data to move us into a planning process. And all I'm doing here is trying to help you visualize what I mean by this notion of a mission statement as an important part of a data-driven planning process. All right, the academic side of the college, we have had a lot of discussion, work, and effort on identifying course level outcomes, program level outcomes, and now institutional level outcomes of student learning. And that process is still in its infancy in all three stages, still needs work, but we are doing it in a process that looks something like this. What we've done pretty well is start to determine what student learning outcomes are out there. What we have not done very well across the institution, at least in terms of what I've seen, is collect that information, analyze it, and use it in our planning moving forward. And what I really haven't seen very much evidence at all about in terms of our academic assessment is making decisions based on that data and what it means to the folks that are generating. It doesn't mean that these two steps aren't happening. I'm just not seeing evidence of that. So those two places are, in terms of the academic side, places that the college has been told explicitly in response to the 2005 study, in response to the 2007 or 2010 periodic review, in increasing intensity, Middle States says you need to start doing this. In regard to those two steps, they've been on us as an institution to do that more clearly than we have been. All right, institutional effectiveness. The idea of doing on the administrative side of the college the equivalent of what we've been talking about doing on the academic side of the college. Middle States has become much clearer and precise in their expectations that assessment isn't just about courses and learning, but it's also about facilities and buildings and budgeting and all the things that go into running the college. And what they're looking for is an institutional planning process of which academic assessment is a subset. And so they have a standard, Standard 7, which they had been historically referred to as institutional effectiveness, and now they're saying, no, this is institutional assessment. They want to be cleaner about what it is that they want us to be doing there. And so we have to be working on developing ways to measure the administrative side of the house and the effectiveness of what they're doing, and again, eventually tying it back to the mission statement. That what they're doing should be informed by that sense of who we are, what we do, and whom we serve. That same mission statement needs to apply to their efforts as it does to the college academic efforts. And so the key to making it all work, as has absolutely been said in a number of places by a number of people, is ongoing collegial conversations about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how to do it better. And then on top of that, writing down what we figured out and keeping records of that. So, consistent with our mission, we need goals that are strategic, that tell us not just what we're going to do next year, but who we expect to be in 5 or 10 years. What that length of time out isn't clear at this point, but we should be thinking about the college that we need to be down the road, and that our work informs not just covering the classes next semester, but making sure that we're ready to serve the students we're going to see in the trends that are changing right before our eyes. We need those goals to be measurable. That's part of our accreditation promise. And then we need to work collaboratively, sharing the evidence that we find and keeping it transparent, well-published, and well-discussed. Now, I gave the PSO kind of a quirky little survey back in December that asked who knew what the mission statement was and why we used it. And the overall effect of that particular presentation was that most folks said they didn't really know much about the college mission statement. However, when you actually talk to some people about what it is we do as a college, they can pretty well tell us what it is we do, who it is we do it for, and why we're doing it. But they just can't rattle off this very, very easily. I took the mission and the 13, 14, or 15 goals, because depending on which document you pull from, we have a different set of goals, slightly different numbers. They don't always line up perfectly, the goals that we have published at various places. And so I took them and I broke them into a survey and asked 3 groups what they thought was from most important to least important of those features. And I got from the DAC to offer transfer occupational technical programs and quality post-secondary education with a set of goals to follow that included preparing students for transfer and employment, that students will acquire general knowledge and basic skills, and that the college will be open access with a diverse student body. Then I talked to the cabinet on 2.5, and they took the survey, and they came up with the mission to provide open access, quality, post-secondary education and transfer programs with the goals of preparing students for transfer employment, providing students with support services to promote student success so that all students acquire general knowledge and basic skills. And then I asked the Board of Trustees to take the quiz, and those are still coming in. I walked away with 5 responses. I've since had 1 more come in, so they may change a little bit. But basically what came so far is a mission of providing open access, affordable, quality post-secondary education where students develop thinking and decision-making skills with the goals of providing students with support services along with effective communication to create trust and respect so that students acquire an understanding of social and cultural differences, all of which leads to student success. So that's where I've come to with the mission statement. The purpose of the forum is for us to hopefully begin a conversation about what is the mission statement to us now and what do we want to do about the idea of making a planning document. That's where I'd like to start the conversation. Any responses to any of this?
The board approves it. Does PSO also approve it?
Good question.
Does the buy-in?
No, absolutely. Good question. In 2004, 2 committees from the PSO came up with this. And then that was vetted through the PSO and then taken to the board. I believe that's right. Go ahead. No, so apparently it's not.
It was representatives from both the ISC and the ASC on a PSO formed committee, and we did take it back to the PSO for approval after we came up with what we came up with.
Okay. So yes, last time it did take that path. Yes?
Was the speaker in January specific about what he thought the mission needed differently, or was there anything that he was specific about? Terry?
Yeah, Terry's idea is that community college education is about learning and of being a learning-centered institution. Of course, he's written about that in a variety of ways, but he was not prescriptive. He said we should be more reflective and try to be cleaner about what it is that we saw ourselves as being, how we accomplish what it is we say we do, and being a lot more clear about who it is we're serving in all of those efforts. In that, he was pretty consistent with the things that I've been talking about. Yes?
How do our values play into the mission statement?
That's a great question. They were created in or at least the standing set that we have were created in 1995. I think they've been looked at a couple of times, but not necessarily formally reviewed. I'm not sure exactly where values emerged, but I assume it was in 95. In 58, what we had was a purpose statement that was given to us from the law that authorized community colleges. And it had 3 basic purposes to being a community college. And that functioned sort of as a quasi-mission statement until 1975, when we formally adopted a version of that as our mission in response to the 1975 Middle States Republic. And then since then, I haven't gotten as far along about how it's changed from there.
The other schools that you reviewed their mission statements, did they incorporate their values within the mission statement?
Varies wildly. It does. It varies wildly. I can tell you of the mission or the colleges who have recently done very well with Middle States. And Bill, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but what I've seen are very short, concise mission statements with very short list of goals that are sustainable and clearly give you a sense of purpose to the college. Sometimes they have elaborate vision statements. Sometimes they have bullet point value statements. So there's a lot of variation about how they set a context for their mission and goals. But the most successful respondents to the middle stage process have been those that have, and I'm borrowing Kathy Carl's point on this, nimble statements that allow the college to respond to a changing sense of purpose and needs, and help them stay focused on who their target service population is.
SUNY had been involved in mission review, and
98, 99.
yeah, and also 2005.
Well, I don't remember. I haven't seen that, but okay.
So is there any idea from SUNY why the mission review will?
So probably the thing that I've seen from SUNY has 5 or 6 points that this is what a SUNY community college has to be. There is a statement, there is a cover on the SUNY website, something about these 5 or 6 things that we have to be: open access and public, and to be honest, I sort of forget, but 5 or 6 items in there. But those are part of what define us. But it doesn't necessarily have to be part of our statement about ourselves, because it is by extension, because we're part of that institution. We don't have to incorporate it.
But my interpretation was that the mission review was very personal to each campus, and that we had to kind of look at ourselves.
I agree with that.
You know, SUNY seems
But we don't have to necessarily import what SUNY says we have to do into our mission statement.
Right.
That's all I'm saying, which is what this looks a little bit more like to me, that we did, that we pulled that sort of stuff and put it in there.
Any mission statement I've ever seen is just about the organization's guiding principles. It's always been a short statement, so maybe this is even a little long. Is it frowned upon to just have a short mission statement and then address some of the other concerns in a vision statement, as you mentioned, and a goal statement? Because or value statement, they're very different.
Right. And again, I want to say that the colleges that have done the best in terms of the review of their missions have had short, clear mission statements that talk about who the college is, what they do, and whom they serve. And so very short statements and a set of goals that is reasonable, reflective of what the college needs to be doing, that is clearly measurable. And then a wide variety of contexts, ways of setting the context, like a vision statement, value statement, sometimes a couple pages long, sometimes just a series of bullets. So that varies. And people are successful with lots of different styles of describing themselves, as long as it comes back to something clear and measurable. That's the thing that defines the successful middle states outcomes that I've seen. And I've looked at, I don't know, 10 or 12 now, that you can get access to, read what they saw.
So we don't really know what part of this mission statement that middle states would have a problem with? I mean, is there a certain...
I'm not suggesting that middle states will necessarily have a problem with this. I'm just suggesting that this is tough for me to wrap my head around as a planning document.
Mm-hmm.
And if they want us to use it as a planning document, that I'd want to think about it in those, how can we make this a useful tool?
So you found colleges that have done that have established a mission statement that would project as a integral part of their planning?
It's not hard, you can Google it. It's hard sometimes, you have to weed through a lot of things sometimes, but there are a lot of colleges, particularly the ones that are doing really, really well with their accreditation, make their stuff available. And middle states make some of their stuff available, particularly at the institutes. I'm not sure about on their webpage if they make that available, but yeah, the idea of sharing good ideas is promoted. Yes.
I did a tiny little bit of research before the forum, and I looked at some schools in New York, and I looked at their mission statements, and they're all similar. I mean, as you said before, it's whatever defines us as an institution. So they're short statements that just give an overview of why they're there. Why were they created in the first place? Why are they there? And then I looked at ours, and ours basically does that. The only line that doesn't seem to fit, just personally, is where it starts to say the college provides educational experiences that enable qualified students to expand their academic capabilities and further develop thinking and decision-making skills. Because now we're not talking about what we're going to do for them. It's more like a goal or an objective, like down the line. So that's the only line that just seemed to be a little bit different.
Okay. I loved, by the way, Finger Lakes, what they did. If you read Finger Lakes' mission statement. And they sailed through their accreditation process.
Could you give us an example of
Could
what
we
that
see a
was
sample?
like, or?
Well, it was like a sentence or two. But I didn't bring it with me, because I was hoping that we would talk about who we are, what we do, and how that might lead to our statement being working for us. And I'll give you again, I want to make sure that you understand that this is my bias when I say this. But my fundamental complaint with this document, other than it's laborious and built by committee, is that it doesn't say a thing about learning directly. And what it does say about education, I suggest, possibly has a philosophy under it that doesn't fit real well with my underlying philosophy about what higher education ought to promote. Not a classic model, but more of a direct learning model. And so for me, but I tell you, that's a bias, and I want to own that. That just pouring knowledge in might not be the philosophy that we want to have as defining who we are, at least from my little corner of the college.
You guys want me to read Finger Lakes?
Oh, yeah.
Statement?
Yes.
Finger Lakes Community College is a supportive, learning-centered environment that empowers our students, provides enriching life experiences, and enhances the quality of life throughout our community. And that's followed by a vision statement.
Yeah, I mean, people set a context for what their marching orders are. But the marching orders should be fairly concise if you're going to march to. That's all I'm saying.
Were those measurable things?
There is, obviously, now you have to go dig into their plan
Yeah.
about how they set that up.
But the mission statement isn't necessarily measurable.
But it should have goals that come out from it that are.
Right,
But you're right, the
That's
vision
not-
the
yeah.
statement itself is more like, I've talked about it in a couple of places as being something like a sextant. It helps you stay on course.
Right.
But then you definitely need tools, or first, indicators, markers, something you can measure,
Right.
and then a measurement strategy, and then a process to figure out what all that measurement means, and then hopefully a planning process that allows time to do that and factor it into where we're going. Yeah. But the statement itself is a tool to help us ask better questions about who we are, what we do, and who do we serve.
just quality of life is hard to measure.
No, actually, there's a lot of things that although you can measure it, right? Because they have some country somewhere that's the happiest place on earth.
Yeah.
So that's what they did, was they did measurements of quality of life. Right? Is it really?
Which one is it?
Lee,
So I don't think a mission statement should have measurable outcomes in it.
I don't disagree with you.
I don't think a mission statement should be a planning document. It's a guiding principle. It's our mission. It's not a planning document. That's what I think. And I don't think we should change our mission statement to suit the accreditation process from middle states. I think we should change the mission statement if we think it needs to be changed. But I don't think we should do it to make, to change it into a planning document if that's what Middle States is saying, unless that's what we think it should be.
Fair enough. I think that's exactly the kind of conversation we should be having. Because you're right. We should do it because it makes sense to us, or we
Right.
shouldn't do it because it makes sense to us, knowing all of the reasons why it's even in the conversation. But why have a mission statement if it's just something you stick on the shelf and never think about it? Why have it at all? If it's not useful to us as an institution, why do we have it?
I'm not saying it shouldn't be useful. I'm saying it shouldn't be asked to be something that we measure necessarily. It should be something that guides us. I think we get really confused when we try to, and I'm not saying you get confused, I'm saying we as a college, because of the recent push for assessment of everything, it's really, really hard for us to keep in mind the difference between a measurable outcome and what we really want. And what we hope for is more than the measurable outcomes we are able to document and prove. And the mission statement should be about that more.
Okay.
That's what I think.
It is really what you stand for, your mission statement. It's what you stand for. I see the measurable things coming out in a vision statement which states how you're going to get there.
Well, what you
So I can
stand
see
for-
how it should connect, but I don't think that.
But I
it should-
want to come back and say, the three things that I said, I think this is what I think is important in a mission statement. And I've said this a few different times, but I'll say it again. The mission statement ought to say, declare who we are. And the mission statement ought to declare what we do. And the mission statement ought to tell us whom we serve. And if it does that, then it becomes a sextant. It becomes a way of making sure that we're on target about who we say we are, what we say we do, and who it is we serve. And if it's clean and nimble that way, and if we want to change who we are, what we do, or whom we're serving, then we have a clear kind of direction about how to go about doing that. Because we've made a public declaration about those things as our course. And then what we want to do is refer back to that when we're talking about changing a program, adding a course, buying a bus, opening a dorm. That when we're doing things, that we're doing it because it either enhances or is part of our process of redefining who we are, what we do, and whom we serve. And that should ground us and make the conversations that we have both strategically and operationally in the college cleaner, more focused, less drama.
I don't disagree with that, Peter, but I think you're talking about a couple different things. When you talk about the mission statement being measurable, you're on a different course than
And if
someone
I've
else's.
said that directly, then that the mission statement itself should be when I say a planning document, a declaration about who we are, what we do.
Your guiding principle.
Yeah.
Right, I get it.
Then you have to have a planning process and an assessment process and all of those other things that your principles, if you like, set the stage for. That thing I wrote, that schematic I wrote up at the top, that guides us. It grounds what we're doing both in terms of planning and policies and procedures and the doing. So you're right, you don't measure that directly per se. In that sense, it guides how you determine what to measure.
Exactly. That's what it should be, and that's the connecting of the dots pieces that
And that makes it a planning document, a useful tool in our planning and our assessment. Sorry about that. However, Middle States will ask us, because they have the very first standard is mission and goals. And the thing that they want you to operationalize, to write in measurable terms, are those goals that fall out of your mission statement.
Well, that's what I was thinking, that maybe the discussion, and it's probably for another day, needs to lead to these goals that we have.
We
rather
absolutely
than the
have to
mission
have a
statement.
discussion about the goals, but I think to do that meaningfully, we still have to have some college consensus about who we are, what we're doing, and the populations that we're serving. I think that conversation is that important first step.
Are we doing that now?
Yeah, that we're starting that now. This is not something you do in a 1 hour kind of process, and it's also something that in a way we should be doing kind of ongoing. And hopefully figure out a way to build it into our own process of self-reflection. Yes?
So in the previous versions of the mission, have they grown from an original, or were they torn down and remade every time a new mission is written? Because if they grow as they go, then you can kind of see, hey, this was happening at that time, and let's add this to the mission, something like that. But if, like what Carla said with that one statement with the qualified students to expand their academic capabilities, that's something that I guess could be argued that we've actually sort of overreached in providing a lot of developmental courses, if you're going to say that that's the only people. So a specific, I think what you're saying is you want general guidelines that we can talk about specifics and goals or something like that, but I'm just wondering about the history of it, how it's grown, and if it's been added to bit by bit, or if it's been redone every time.
Well, other people in this room were part of the periodic review in 2010, and the decennial self-study in 2005. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I was on the 2005 study group, and as far as I know, we didn't talk, at least in the institutional effectiveness group, we didn't talk about mission at all. So I don't know, but that was just in that group.
I can address some of that. I mean, Tim and I were in the 2004 group that addressed the mission and goals and came up with this version. I was also on 2004 self-study group on mission and goals, because that was one of the Middle States self-study groups. The word qualified was, we had a long discussion about that when we had the committee, because back then there was the term ability to benefit, and people were trying to push being able to take classes when they really didn't have the ability to benefit, and that's why we used the qualified. I mean, it would include students who were up to the level of our developmental classes. Those students would be qualified, but those that didn't meet the ability to benefit would not. When we did this, I can, definitely say that our decisions, Tim, you can agree with me or shoot me down, I don't know. Our decisions, we started with a much larger mission than this. And we found that the mission at the time, a lot of the statements in there were similar to the one about the college provides. It was the college provides this, the college provides that, and we didn't feel that really was a mission. This one we put in there because we just felt that to be able to provide the educational experiences that would benefit the students was an important thing to say, and we didn't know how else to say it. We recommended the 5-year review, that review it every 5 years, and part of it was because some of the statements that we had in the old mission were outdated. Once upon a time I saw Bob Newhart show one where they were renewing their vows, and this was in the 90s, and his vows were from the 70s. So in looking at this, we felt it was important that it should be reviewed every 5 years rather than, hey, let's wait for next time. But what we came up with was internally driven, not externally driven. It was the Middle States self-study, I hate being a stutterer, that resulted in the idea of, hey, the PSO said we should look at this. But, we didn't have an external drive like Middle States didn't have any recommendations about, we were just like, well, what do we feel about the mission statement we have now as to who we are? So that's how we came up with what we did.
That's funny that you said that, because the ability to benefit program is gone now, right?
Right.
So,
And that's why we recommended that.
Right,
that's
our thing.
So our
a point that you
definition-
put in, and again, it's now kind of over, whatever qualified was there for, it kind of has
But the
either
reason for the
overreached or
word,
underreached.
the reason for the word qualified was because that definition could be different for different areas within the college. that to be qualified to enter the nursing program,
Right.
Dutchess Community College is
Yeah,
different
yeah.
than being qualified to enter
Right, right.
some other programs.
And I guess people would take the qualified in certain ways, which is, it sounds like a specific, even though it's a general. And the thing that I kind of went back towards when I said, how has it evolved, is have people added, and you didn't, you did, I guess, you did a tear down and a rebuild when you redid it.
Yeah.
And as some things go, and that's what I was questioning, because if a mission starts out at 3 sentences, and then we realize we have a problem, well, let's add this to the mission. And then we have another thing that we need to deal with, let's add that to the mission. It can get confused, and I was just wondering if that's why, if that's why it was long when you started looking at it, or if it might seem longer than people might want to see it right now.
Bill?
I've been listening to it, and Peter and I have had many discussions over this. And we don't always agree and all that. I think what we have to think about, the mission is the framework in which everything we do should fit. Okay? So when we read that, it should tell someone why we're here, what our purpose is, and who we serve. And all the decisions that we make inside this institution should fit within that. And so along with that is the framework is what we are our values. In other words, also when we make decisions, do we strive to those values when we make decisions? The vision is really where we want to be. What do we aspire to be? The goals, as we define them, are things that we feel we need to do to get to that, aspire to that vision. Those should be measurable. If we say we want to be an institute, if our vision is to be a premier institution where 90% of our students that come to us graduate, that might be realistic, but that would be a vision. From there you would set goals in terms of student service, in terms of programs, and all those things that you would want to do to get to that aspired point. And underneath those are measurable steps. When you set objectives, it's measurable, and it guides you. So when we talk about the mission as a planning document, we talk about it as that's the framework in which we're working. We plan to within that framework, and we plan to move forward within that. The reason that it's important to look at every 5 years is we might start pushing the boundaries of that framework. And is the framework shifted? Do we need to shift our frame of reference of why we're here and what we're doing? An example, in Florida, they had 2-year institutions all of a sudden offering bachelor's degrees. The framework in which they were changed, therefore their mission changed. Our mission is fairly clear. We're an open access institution. We have a population. The question is, does this accurately reflect who we are today? That's the question. It was 10 years ago, but is it today? And if it's not, then we need to agree that maybe we need to take a good look at it. Or maybe we say, you know what, it does define us, and let's just move forward.
That's right. Any other thoughts about who we are, what we do, what we serve? Yes, or how to facilitate this conversation further.
Is the mission supposed to inspire the people that work there? I read the Finger Lakes, they're a supportive, learning-centered environment. That's something that really sets a tone. It might inspire people as to how they do what they do and things like that. Whereas, we have a large thing about what we offer, every type of program, every type of service. But from what I've seen, the mission statements, it's succinct. I agree, succinct. But it should also, kind of rally the forces, and rally everyone together to say, this is what we are, this is what we do, and let's make sure we're always doing it. There isn't a lot there that kind of inspires me to kind of, this guides me. And that's kind of what I saw the mission from Finger, just because you mentioned it. They're a supportive, learning-centered environment. They empower their students. Those are things that get people, that really get people excited and inspired about what they do and set the course.
But a number of places, what they've done is they've made a statement about who they are, why they're there, and then they use their value statements. This is who we are. If you want to be a part of, a caring institution, student-centered, those are values that we as an institution hold on to. So if you feel that that's who you are, the commitment to helping students progress or whatever the values happen to be, those are the inspiring type of things that you would look at and say, okay, there's a place that I want to work because I have values like them.
just as an example, the mission statement at the Culinary Institute of America is a little snobby because they are the premier culinary, or to provide the world's premier culinary education and to educate the leaders in the hospitality industry. And so like that's a rally. And then they incorporate their values where we teach that through professionalism, ethics, diversity, excellence, and through culinary education. And so they have their value, and it was just like 2 lines, and everybody in the Institute knew it, could say it verbatim, and we used it daily. So, but it was a rally, like you were saying before, because like when you're the premier and you're educating leaders, you know, it promotes that excellence and professionalism.
The key, though, is that it's useful to us in some way. Maybe as a rallying cry, maybe not. But if it's not useful, why do we have it at all? Of course, the obvious answer to that is because Middle States somewhere down the road said we had to, probably around 1975, would be my guess, because that's where it emerged. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't own it, make it our own, make it useful to us, and be clear about what it is, what its use is, and therefore it becomes, like the culinaries is for them, a tool that helps us have conversations about who we are, what we do, and who do we serve.
Having done a mission statement with great pain for a statewide organization, what we did was we, first of all, came up with the methodology of how are we going to do it, and it was to lock everybody from New York City all the way up to Buffalo. Into one, from New York City to Buffalo, trying to get those 2 groups to agree was hard. But bring everybody together, lock us in a room for 8 hours, swear to God, start with nothing, and just, you know, divide up, take pieces, do this, come back, go out, come back. Is there a method that you have for looking at this? Are we
opening the door
doing
right now for coming up with how to do this.
And that's what we're doing now, is looking at how we should organize this in order to review that. Okay.
This is an open, you know, are we happy with this? Do we want to do anything with this? And if so, where do we go from there in a conversation, our first step? That's what this is.
Maybe we look at the things that are implicit in a community college, like you said, Sue says a community college is this. And we look at that and we say, okay, well, we don't need to say those things. We need to say the things that are particular to us. And maybe that would be a starting point. That, you know, this is redundancy, this by nature of being a community college, here are these things.
Since we are
So,
a SUNY community college, we
right.
don't need to reaffirm that in our mission statement.
Right,
Is
right.
what, so that's a suggestion about
Do we have to
this.
reference that stuff is there in our mission statement somehow?
There's no law. There's
Well,
no
I'm
rule.
just-
There's no rule.
If we're trying to convey to everybody else who we are,
Mhm.
then we have to make sure we convey that being part of SUNY is an important part of us. And we have to somehow engage that into our identity, don't we?
I don't have strong feelings about that as being central to who we are, but that doesn't mean that I don't say I'm part of, you know, the SUNY system.
I think you do that in
certainly
other ways. I don't know that it necessarily has to be part of that mission.
I have a fundamental question about this. Do you envision that this mission statement is describing who we are, or is it describing what we do? I see those as not necessarily the same thing. And so that looks to me to be what we do. We provide access, we provide educational opportunities. But what I heard you say is who we are, which is different. And so that's a fundamentally different tone and fundamentally different language.
And sometimes
So-
what
so
people
that's my
use their
question.
mission statement for sometimes there's conflicting purposes. And you have to make decisions about, do you want the conflict built into the mission statement, or does one piece of your mission statement, the message, is it more about who you are and what you do? Is it And are those really that different, or that you can't have one without the other? But I think it needs both, plus some mention about whom we serve.
But if you talk about the Finger Lakes, when it says we're a supportive environment, it's who they are. It doesn't talk about transfer programs and those sorts of things. That's what we did.
Right, and their process was theirs, and I'm not suggesting we lift their statement. There is the questions about what do we want the mission, how are we going to be able to use the mission statement? What are we going to use it for? How is this going to be a useful piece of paper? I mean, why do we have a mission statement? That's probably the first question. Why do we as an institution have a mission statement?
That's
Other
exactly
than,
what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Do we have it because we want to talk about what we do? Or do we have it because we want to talk about what we are, who we are? And until we figure that out, I don't think we can talk about what it says.
Okay. I think that's
I'm just suggesting this.
a good orienting point, yes. I'm sorry.
Okay, it just seems that this may not be the time to do this, so I guess my question is, why does this become so important to you in your mind to start pushing this? This is not an easy process to go through. It's a process that needs a fair amount of energy. It needs community building. It needs a lot of place for discussion. It seems that there's so many other things right now going on that you're not going to get the focus that you want. This would take a fair amount of focus. It would be a campus-wide focus. So I guess I'm sitting here kind of going, you know, Peter, we really don't need another thing to do. And so I guess I'm asking, do you feel this push from middle states that we better look at this real carefully, or is this an internal to you for whatever reason you got excited about the mission statement and so therefore want to push it? It just doesn't strike me as an opportune time right now. But go ahead. Is there some other motivating force other than your own desire?
There's three ways that I want to try to answer that.
Okay.
So I've been part of the discussion about data and how to use data in the institution for a long time. And all of these things were a natural extension for me about how to actually build a process to make that work at the college. Then I got invited to be the co-chair of the Middle States process, and they inundated me with, if you're going to have a successful study, it needs to start with being clear about who you are and what you do, the mission. And so yes, going to the Institute, reading all of the planning documents, looking at what other colleges are doing, has really given me a lot of focus on the importance of mission statements to a college functioning more effectively. And so that has been a direct result of my involvement with Middle States. And then this latest little gift that I have of being the interim dean, working on assessment, sort of reinforces that need to ground, some sort of planning process so that assessment makes sense. So yeah, in all three ways, I'm, working towards that one kind of goal of why making the case that we become a data-driven decision-making institution makes any sense at all. And I think it might start with this discussion about who we are and what we do.
Just to follow up on that, then maybe we can start from where you find it to be deficient, this particular mission statement.
Well, I told you early on.
Yeah.
We don't say a word about learning as an important component of who we are or what we do. So for
it has
me,
to be in the mission statement, something that is measurable. That's where you're
no,
coming
not
from?
measurable. Just some that we're about teaching and learning and teaching. That to me, that's like a fundamental component that's not directly stated.
So it's something that
At least not in a philosophy that I feel comfortable with.
Maybe I missed it. Did Middle States ever imply that somehow this is deficient and not acceptable?
Nope,
or
not even a
somehow
little.
lacking?
Not even a little.
Okay, then I'm kind of going with Joanna as to, in the curriculum committee, we can't even figure out the exos.
Yeah.
And so, I'm under the assumption we have some sort of timeline, deadline perhaps, and,
where is this going? I guess is my question.
Well, one of the
Where-
things.
Where is it deficient?
One of the things we have to remember is that we said we would do it. In 2005, we said we would do it, and we have not.
What is the if?
Review the
Review
mission
it every
statement.
5 years.
Yeah, we said we'd review it.
We
did
committed
ask, but
that we would review the mission statement on a regular basis. We have not as an institution.
And that's part of the Middle States. We told them we were going to do this, and we have not completed that.
That's correct.
We haven't told them how we need to change it, or if we need to change it or not. But we've told them that we're going to
Have a
engage
dialogue.
in a dialogue, which,
This will be having that dialogue.
So, right now, we're basically crossing that T and dotting that I.
But we're talking about, is it, the question is it a time to enter a process of looking at our mission? And again, when Peter talks about it as a planning document, when we talk about planning and budgeting, all that stuff, it all should be in support of the mission. And so is the mission the right one? Is the mission currently giving the right message so that all our planning and budgeting should come from that mission as it is now?
And Bill and I are expressing a bias that it's a planning document. Definitely, we've been on the same page since November about that idea, talking about it a lot. So we are sort of marching with that idea.
It's planning, Peter, in that when you're doing planning, you need to keep that in your frame. It's not that the mission statement is not a planning document as such, but it's the guiding tool when you plan. That's what you're having to tie it back to. Why are we here? Who are we serving? When we make allocations of funds or resources.
I'm always like thinking and rethinking about all this stuff, so I might not even believe what I'm about to say in a few minutes. But it seems to me that this should really be like one of the last discussions that we have. Because if assessment is really going to be data-driven, and we're going to be doing this whole Middle States self-study, which, remember, is separate from assessment, because we're just analyzing the college and making recommendations, so it's separate. But if we're going to be doing this study and then deciding, do we have something to back this up? Do we have something to back this up? And we look from courses up, then we would kind of see, like we would see if we have the information to say, hey, wait a minute, we should really be including, something about learning or, whatever we're going to say, and then that should be included into the mission. But it just seems like we skipped some levels here, and then, there's some gaps. And so seems like a very broad discussion, and I'm kind of wondering, why right now? Why don't we see how things look? Why don't we start doing our reports and analyzing things, and then we might have more input into what we want to say.
Now, I would gently suggest that probably was something along the lines that led to this. That it was piecing into everything that we got, because we never had a clear vision of who we were, what we did, who we served. We never had that conversation, not in a deliberative kind of why is this important to us or not kind of way. And I know I've been around a number of venues where we talk about how important having those conversations are, and so I'm trying to push that now. But I think it's been echoed in other places before that we don't do this very well. Have this kind of conversation with ourselves. And so I'm pushing that we should. And that it's never going to be a good time, so we have to sort of make a time and get going. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that the self-study that we are going to do is what we did in the last 10 years. With this mission, and whatever was attached to these missions, have we really done that? So are we going to change these missions and then do the self-study to fit the new mission? We can't do that, right?
No, of course not. What we're going to be looking at through at least if this mission changes, the point where it changes, would be a reflection of that.
So it's going to come later, right? So
But
the self-study really is not going to be, this is not the sexton that you mentioned. This will not be the one that...
yeah, well, here's a different analogy that I have. I would suggest that this is more like a set of instructions about how to put a snowblower together from Sears, and that it's kind of dense and it's hard to follow and cumbersome. And so I have a tendency to throw it away and just put the thing together, on my own. And I would suggest that that's not the sextant that I want to use, moving forward, if I had any say.
Moving forward.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
This is all about moving forward. And then that process you're talking about is taking stock of where we've been through the last 10 years, and that starts in the fall, and you're right about that.
I like what Carla said, so I hope you just continue to believe it.
Okay.
I'll be behind you, see? I think that makes so much more sense. It's the first moment that I kind of went, oh, okay, that makes sense. Let's look at who we've been for the last 10 years or whatever, what we've done, and then use that. That makes so much more sense to me, is collect our data, look at what that says about us, ask whether that's what we want it to say about us, and then kind of as a dream forward for the next go-round, craft something that will set the foundation for what we do then the next 10 years. That makes a lot more sense to me than right now trying to change this, which has been in place for a while at least. Again, I come back to the fact that you're pumping too much into a well that's already full. And people need time to think about it. I think it's great to get this discussion going now, but I really like what Carla said. I think that makes so.
See, I don't disagree with you that we need to be actively taking stock of where we've been the last 10 years, and hopefully we're setting up a study process to do that work in earnest beginning in the fall with the middle state stuff. But in terms of planning and operations and running the college, just what we do all the time, I think we should be taking stock of that now, while we're looking at our evidence, using our evidence, yes, about who we've been and what we've done, but also at the same time having conversations about who are we now, and
who are we going to be,
and most importantly, who are we going to be. And one of the things that's fundamentally missing from our collective conversations, top to bottom and bottom to top, is any real sense of vision about where we're going. It's not part of our culture to be strategic. And so part of being strategic is making some assumptions about where we've got to get to, who we're going to be serving, how is that changing, and how to prepare for that. And I'm not thinking that what we've done the last 10 years is going to be the best recipe for getting ready for that process. That we need to be doing both things, and maybe 100 other things.
But you say that we're not particularly good at these conversations, and I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, I'm speaking as an institution, not as an individual.
No, I didn't take it personally. So I think taking it in steps, well, what would it take so that we would start talking about this stuff more? It would take having time and in some type of structured environment to have these discussions. And I think the discussions are good. I think they're important to all of us. But I think that saying we're undertaking these discussions in a time frame, let's just say before we start the self-study to change our mission, I just kind of think that's going to crash and burn. In my own personal opinion. I think these discussions are great. I think that a logical step would be to try to create some type of forums, because that's what we lack. We don't have, the only forum we have.
Forums, did you say?
Forum. That's
Forums. I like forum better than forums. So.
Forums, yeah, no, yeah, I'm with you.
We got plenty of
We don't have the opportunities to sit and talk about stuff like this. We used to do this a lot more.
And
We used to do this a lot more.
yeah, and I think that's a great suggestion. And might I suggest that in the last 5 minutes, we try to, or 3, or whatever we got before I give my midterm, and come to some conclusions as to what we did today?
That's great. Thank you.
Can I just say, I mean,
You
we
absolutely.
all agree that this statement is obsolete. I think we agreed on that it needs to change.
I'm not sure that we did agree on that, but some people voiced opinions
But
like that.
We're talking about a frame.
Yeah.
You don't buy a frame before you buy a picture. You buy your picture and then maybe you get a frame around. And so
really, we should start from the goals, and it is true. I mean, if there is an urgency to change this, we can always find something a little bit more, with a statement that it's more general, and then maybe start changing from there. I mean, if there is such an urgency to change it, we don't have to be very, very specific at this point.
Let me back off the urgency piece if I'm pushing that too hard. But let me also say that I absolutely think that that mission is the picture we're talking about. And if we don't have that picture and make that picture clear to ourselves, then it is tough to build a frame around it. And the frame building is the planning and the assessment process. But then you and I have a different take on that. The picture is, you know, who are we, what are we doing, and why are we doing it? And then whether or not what we've done and what we need to do are moving towards any of those objectives is something that's hard to do when we aren't in agreement about who we haven't in any systematic way agreed as to who we are, other than what Sumi has said, who we are, what we are.
So we're becoming a complement to the picture. I mean, our assessment, what we're doing in class, it's just a complement, because that's what the picture is.
The language isn't working. I'm not sure what the complement
They're
is.
missing the point
that our self-study is what we tied to this.
That's an interesting, I love that picture of a frame, empty frame.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of the self-study and the timing of perhaps designing a new mission, those of us who are working on the self-study are tied to this mission statement, and we are, as far as I understand it, locked into studying ourselves against the mission statement under which we operated for the time period we are assessing, and that a new mission statement may come out of the conclusions we reach about how well we conform to this one. Maybe we need to readjust and change it if we find spaces where we have not conformed well to this one. But in terms of assessment, in the documents we're producing, in the work groups we're running, because this is a period that has ended based upon this mission statement, that's what we're assessing. Did I just make that up?
So, yes, to your question in short.
Thank you. Because I thought I was losing my mind. There ain't much of it left.
Moving forward, at least what I plan for next year is monthly open forums that are theoretically going to end up on the super calendar, not with defined topics. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't have more conversations about the mission, the goals, all of this stuff moving forward this semester as well. But not before spring break, apparently. I got told that there's no way that we, and then functionally that means not again until the end of March. So I'm shooting for sometime in the end of March to have another forum.
Based on this, looking at mission.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now, I'm still thinking that this conversation is worth having. And if you guys will join me in it, then great. If not, then you're going to have to find a different way to get to the document.
Got to teach. Sorry.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, but does anybody have any, see anything glaringly wrong with this? Because I don't really think this is a bad mission statement to keep right now anyway. I mean, we are an open institution. We do the things that it says. We might want to add things in the future, but I don't really see that this doesn't say right now what the institution is. So I think that, I mean, what was said before is right, and the analogy was right, but in reverse of what you were saying before. I think that we might find proof, within our study, that we might want to make some adjustments to this. But right now, I mean, I would understand if we had nothing. If we had absolutely nothing and didn't have anything that said who we are, I would completely agree with you. You have to start somewhere. But, I mean, it's here. I don't see anything wrong with it right now. So.
Well, even if it's right, we should still look at it. Even if it's perfect, we need to recommit to it through exploring it. If we don't, it becomes dogma, it becomes a dead piece of writing in a shelf somewhere, which is what it's done pretty routinely in the past, at least in my experience of the college. And so active exploration, I think that whether we change it or not isn't the question. It's that we're taking stock of it and re-owning it or not. That's what I've been saying, trying to say that we should be doing. Yeah.
Well, when we went to the PSO meeting and we talked about the mission statement, we were all supposed to write it down, or who knew it. I thought I was the only one in the room that didn't even know where to start, and I clearly wasn't. And that's the problem when you have a mission statement that takes up an entire whiteboard. I mean, having been through, my other life at IBM, mission statements were short, concise, everybody knew what they were, everybody could rattle them off, everybody was working towards the same goal. It may have changed every 2 or 3 years, but we all knew what it was. That's not a mission statement, that's a story. Nobody knew what that was. Everybody in that room that's been here for any amount of time should have been able to rattle off a mission statement, and I will bet to say most of them.
Well, I thank you for coming. We'll do this again at the end of March.
I forgot.